The story of how the Roman Empire began is one of ambition, resilience, and the power of unity. At first, Rome was nothing more than a small collection of huts on the hills near the Tiber River, surrounded by more powerful neighbors. It had no grand monuments, no mighty army, no fame beyond its own fields, but the people of Rome were determined. They valued discipline, loyalty, and hard work, and they learned to defend themselves against stronger enemies. In the early days, Rome was ruled by kings, each adding something to the city's strength: walls for protection, temples for the gods, and traditions that would last for centuries. Eventually, the Romans grew tired of kings and chose a new path, creating the Republic, where leaders were chosen and power was shared. This system allowed Rome to grow because decisions could be made quickly in times of war, and the people felt they had a stake in their city's success. From this humble beginning with a small population and limited land, Rome planted the seeds of an empire that would one day rule much of the known world. It was not built in a moment, but through steady effort, wise alliances, and the belief that Rome's destiny was far greater than its present. The rise of the Roman Republic was a turning point in history, showing how a community could thrive without a single ruler controlling everything. Instead of one king making all the decisions, Rome's power was divided among elected officials known as consuls and a senate made up of respected elders. This meant that ideas could be debated, laws could be discussed, and mistakes could be corrected. The Republic wasn't perfect. Wealthy families often held more influence, and ordinary citizens still had to fight for their rights. But it gave the people a sense of involvement in their government. Every citizen had duties, from serving in the army to voting in assemblies, and this shared responsibility made Rome strong. The Republic also encouraged competition among leaders, which drove many to achieve greatness in politics, law, and the military. Over time, this system gave Rome the flexibility to adapt and expand, turning it into a powerhouse in the Mediterranean. What started as a small city with local concerns became a state that could plan decades ahead, form strategic alliances, and survive challenges that might have destroyed weaker nations. Rome's military strength was not just about having large armies, it was about discipline, training, and organization. Roman soldiers called legionaries were not ordinary fighters. They were highly trained, well-equipped, and taught to move as one unit. Each legion was like a well-oiled machine, with soldiers trained to follow orders instantly, even in the heat of battle. They carried shields, swords, and javelins, and their famous rectangular formations could withstand enemy attacks for hours. But Rome's true advantage was its ability to adapt. If an enemy used a new weapon or tactic, Rome would study it, copy it, and improve it. Soldiers built roads as they marched, which allowed supplies and reinforcements to reach battlefields quickly. Victories were not left to chance. They were planned with careful strategies, surprise attacks, and relentless persistence. Even when defeated, Rome learned from its losses, returning stronger and wiser. This military brilliance allowed Rome to expand its borders far beyond Italy, turning conquered lands into loyal provinces that supported the empire's growth. It was this combination of skill, discipline, and innovation that made Rome's armies nearly unstoppable for centuries. Roman culture and architecture became some of the most influential forces in the ancient world, shaping not only their empire, but also the civilizations that came after. The Romans were master builders, creating roads, bridges, aqueducts, and grand arenas that still inspire awe today. They perfected the use of concrete, which allowed them to construct massive, durable structures like the Colosseum and the Pantheon. These weren't just beautiful buildings, they were symbols of power, engineering skill, and the unity of Rome. Roman culture blended their own traditions with those of the peoples they conquered, creating a rich mix of languages, art, and customs. Latin became the empire's language, influencing countless future languages, and Roman laws formed the basis for many legal systems still used today. They valued public life, filling their cities with baths, theaters, and marketplaces where citizens could gather, trade, and share ideas. More than just a political or military force, Rome became a cultural beacon, spreading its way of life across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. This cultural foundation helped hold the empire together, even across vast distances and diverse peoples. The role of Julius Caesar marked one of the most dramatic turning points in Roman history. He was not only a brilliant general, but also a master politician who understood how to win both battles and hearts. Caesar expanded Rome's territories through daring campaigns, especially in Gaul, and his victories made him incredibly popular among soldiers and ordinary citizens. However, his growing influence threatened the power of the Senate and the traditional republican system. When tensions boiled over, Caesar famously crossed the Rubicon River with his army, a bold act that signaled civil war. His triumph over his rivals allowed him to take control as dictator, introducing reforms that improved the lives of many Romans, such as reorganizing the calendar and reducing debts. Yet his concentration of power alarmed those who feared Rome would lose its republican values. This fear ultimately led to his assassination by senators who believed they were saving the republic. Instead, his death plunged Rome into more chaos, paving the way for the rise of emperors. Caesar's life and death symbolized the end of the Roman Republic and the dawn of a new imperial age. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, was one of the most remarkable eras in the empire's history, lasting about 2 centuries. It began under Emperor Augustus and brought an unprecedented period of stability, prosperity, and cultural growth. During this time, the empire's vast network of roads and sea routes allowed goods, ideas, and people to move freely across thousands of miles. Cities flourished with markets, theaters, and public baths, and Roman law ensured order across lands filled with different languages and customs. Farmers could work their fields without fear of constant war, and merchants could travel safely from Britain to Egypt. Art, literature, and architecture thrived as the empire invested in grand monuments and civic projects. But Pax Romana wasn't just about peace. It was about Rome's ability to maintain control without constant military conflict, relying instead on strong governance, efficient administration, and a sense of shared identity. This golden age gave Rome the strength to grow culturally and economically, leaving behind legacies that would inspire civilizations for centuries. The decline of the Roman Empire was not the result of a single event, but a long and complex process influenced by many factors. As the empire expanded, it became increasingly difficult to govern such vast territories. Corruption and political instability weakened the central government, while constant changes in leadership created chaos. Heavy taxation and economic troubles placed a burden on the common people, and inflation made daily life harder. Rome's once powerful army began to rely more on mercenaries, soldiers for hire, who often had little loyalty to the empire. External pressures also mounted as various tribes, such as the Goths and Vandals, pushed against Rome's borders, eventually breaching them. The division of the empire into eastern and western halves further strained resources, and while the Eastern Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, survived for centuries, the Western Empire grew weaker. By the time Rome fell to invading forces in the 5th century, its internal decay had left it vulnerable. The fall of Rome marked the end of ancient dominance in Europe and ushered in a new, uncertain era, often referred to as the Dark Ages. Roman culture and daily life were rich, diverse, and deeply influential on future civilizations. In bustling Roman cities, life revolved around public spaces, forums for politics and trade, amphitheaters for entertainment, and baths for relaxation and socializing. Romans enjoyed grand spectacles such as gladiator games, chariot races, and theatrical performances, which were as much about community pride as they were about leisure. Education was valued, especially for boys in wealthier families who learned reading, writing, philosophy, and rhetoric. Religion played a central role, with Romans worshiping a pantheon of gods and goddesses, often adopting deities from the cultures they conquered. Family was the core of Roman society, with strong respect for elders and clear roles within the household. Cuisine reflected Rome's diversity: simple bread and olive oil for the poor, elaborate feasts with exotic ingredients for the wealthy. Roman architecture, engineering, and art surrounded daily life, from the aqueducts that brought clean water to the mosaics decorating homes. These traditions and innovations not only shaped the Roman identity, but also left an enduring mark on the world's cultural heritage. The legacy of the Roman Empire is still visible today, woven into the foundations of modern society. Roman law influenced legal systems across Europe and beyond, introducing principles like equality before the law and the idea that justice should be based on evidence. Their architectural genius gave the world structures such as amphitheaters, aqueducts, and domed buildings, inspiring countless designs in later centuries. The Latin language became the root of many modern tongues, including Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, while also contributing heavily to English vocabulary. Roman roads, built with remarkable precision, laid the groundwork for modern infrastructure, some still in use 2,000 years later. Their calendar, with a few adjustments, is the one we still follow today. Even political ideas, like a Senate and representative assemblies, echo in democratic systems around the world. Beyond physical creations, the Roman spirit of ambition, discipline, and adaptability continues to inspire. In many ways, Rome never truly disappeared. It simply evolved, leaving behind a cultural and intellectual inheritance that shapes our everyday lives. It began, as many great stories do, with a legend. Along the banks of the river Tiber, two brothers, Romulus and Remus, were said to have been raised by a she-wolf. One would eventually become the founder of a city that would rise from huts and dirt paths into marble palaces and mighty walls: Rome. From these humble origins, the seeds of greatness were planted, not in wealth, but in vision, unity, and a relentless spirit. The early days of Rome were not about emperors or armies marching across continents. They were about survival. The city grew into a republic, a system where leaders were chosen and power was shared, though not always equally. This system gave Rome a foundation strong enough to endure centuries, but it also sowed the seeds of political rivalries and ambition that would later change everything. Rome's military became its heartbeat. Soldiers trained with discipline unmatched in the ancient world, carrying not just weapons, but the pride of their homeland. Conquests stretched Rome's borders beyond imagination, bringing wealth, slaves, and resources, but also new challenges in ruling distant lands. With each victory, Rome's power swelled, and so did its appetite for more. Then came the turning point, the transformation from republic to empire. Civil wars and power struggles led to the rise of Julius Caesar, whose ambition pushed Rome toward a new era. His assassination was meant to save the republic, but instead it cleared the path for Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, who brought stability, expansion, and the golden age of the empire. Under emperors like Augustus, Trajan, and Marcus Aurelius, Rome reached the peak of its glory. Roads stretched for thousands of miles, aqueducts carried water to bustling cities, and grand arenas hosted games that thrilled crowds. Art, literature, and law flourished, shaping the culture of an empire that felt unstoppable. Yet behind the beauty and power, cracks began to form. Corruption seeped into politics. The gap between rich and poor widened. Armies became loyal to their generals rather than the empire. Heavy taxes drained the people's spirit. Rome, once united, began to split, not just in its lands, but in its heart. As centuries passed, outside threats grew. Germanic tribes, Huns, and other forces pressed against Rome's borders. The empire split into eastern and western halves, and the Western Empire, weakened and fractured, finally fell in 476 AD when its last emperor was dethroned. But the fall was not the end. Rome's influence endured in the languages we speak, the laws we follow, the architecture that still stands, and the ideas of governance that shape nations today. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire was not just a story of power, but a lesson in ambition, unity, and the dangers of losing both.